The morning sun cast long shadows across the sprawling military compound as Captain Sarah Chun stepped out of the dusty transport vehicle. Her combat boots hit the gravel with a quiet thud that seemed to echo in the sudden silence that fell over the training yard. Around her, dozens of hardened soldiers stopped mid-conversation, their eyes tracking her movement with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed amusement. At first glance, Sarah appeared unremarkable among the sea of military personnel. Standing at 5 feet 4 inches with a slight build, she looked more like someone who belonged behind a desk than in the field with elite forces. Her uniform was crisp and new, without the faded patches and worn edges that marked a veteran. The absence of visible scars or the weathered look that came from years of combat operations made her stand out like a fresh recruit on their first day. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, a barrel-chested man with arms like tree trunks, nudged his companion and whispered loud enough for others to hear, "Look what they sent us." Command must be getting desperate if they're recruiting office workers now. His comments sparked a ripple of snickers from the nearby group of soldiers who had been running drills since dawn. Sergeant First Class David Thompson, a 20-year veteran with multiple deployment ribbons covering his chest, shook his head with visible disappointment. "I've seen everything now. They're probably going to ask us to babysit her through basic combat maneuvers. This is what happens when politicians start making military decisions instead of soldiers." The compound buzzed with similar conversations as words spread quickly through the ranks. Sarah Chun had been assigned to Delta Force Unit 7, one of the most elite and demanding special operations teams in the military. These men had earned their positions through years of grueling training, countless dangerous missions, and proving themselves under the most extreme conditions imaginable. The idea that someone who looked like she had never seen real combat could be placed among their ranks struck them as either a joke or a serious mistake in the assignment process. Major William Hayes, the commanding officer of the unit, emerged from the administrative building with a clipboard in his hand and a look of confusion on his weathered face. He had been expecting the arrival of a new team member, but the file he had received contained minimal information. All he knew was that Captain Chun came with high recommendations from command and had been personally selected for the position. The lack of detailed background information was unusual, but direct orders from his superiors left no room for questions. "Attention!" Major Hayes called out, his voice cutting through the morning air like a blade. The soldiers immediately snapped to attention, their conversations dying instantly. "We have a new addition to our unit. Captain Sarah Chun will be joining Delta Force Unit 7 effective immediately. I expect everyone to extend the same professional courtesy we show all team members." The major's words carried the weight of authority, but they could not hide the skeptical expressions that crossed many faces in the assembled group. These were men who had served together through multiple combat zones, who had saved each other's lives more times than they could count, and who had developed an unshakable bond forged in the crucible of warfare. The introduction of someone who appeared to lack their experience felt like a disruption to their carefully balanced team dynamic. Staff Sergeant Mike O'Connor, whose expertise in explosives had earned him legendary status within special operations circles, leaned toward his teammate and muttered, "I give her 2 days before she requests a transfer back to whatever desk job she came from. This isn't a place for people who can't handle the pressure." The assumption that Sarah was inexperienced was reinforced by her demeanor. She remained quiet and observant, not attempting to prove herself through loud declarations or aggressive posturing. In military culture, especially among elite units, silence from newcomers was often interpreted as uncertainty or fear rather than tactical assessment. Her careful observation of the compound layout, personnel positions, and security protocols went unnoticed by soldiers who were busy making judgments based on surface appearances. As the morning progressed, Sarah was assigned a bunk in the barracks and given a tour of the facilities. Her guide, Corporal James Wright, was polite, but clearly going through the motions of showing around someone he expected would not be staying long. He pointed out the mess hall, the equipment rooms, the medical facility, and the various training areas with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had given the same tour countless times to personnel who came and went. The training schedule starts at 500 hours. Wright explained as they walked past the obstacle course that had been designed to push even the most physically fit soldiers to their limits. Physical conditioning, weapons training, tactical exercises, and mission planning take up most of the day. It's pretty intense, so don't feel bad if you need to request modified duties while you adjust to the pace. His assumption that she would need special accommodations was delivered with genuine kindness, but it reflected the general consensus among the unit members. They had collectively decided that Sarah was either a political appointment, someone's relative who needed a prestigious assignment for career advancement, or perhaps a specialist in some non-combat field who had been misassigned to their unit through administrative error. The lunch period provided the first real opportunity for extended interaction between Sarah and her new teammates. The mess hall conversations were dominated by war stories, tactical discussions, and good-natured competition about various skills and achievements. Sarah listened more than she spoke, occasionally asking questions about specific procedures or equipment, but generally maintaining the same quiet, observational stance that had marked her arrival. "Sochin," Lieutenant Rodriguez said between bites of his meal, "what's your background? Where are you transferring in from?" His question carried the expectation that her answer would confirm their assumptions about her lack of combat experience. "I've been involved in various operations over the past few years," Sarah replied in a measured tone that gave away nothing specific. "Different assignments, different locations. I'm looking forward to working with this unit." Her vague response was interpreted as evasiveness, possibly because she was trying to hide a lack of substantial field experience. The men exchanged glances that clearly communicated their shared opinion that their suspicions were being confirmed. Someone with genuine special operations background would typically share at least general details about previous units or deployment regions, following the military tradition of establishing credibility through service history. Sergeant Thompson, whose direct approach had served him well throughout his career, decided to probe more specifically. "What's your specialty?" Every operator here has specific skills that contribute to mission success. Rodriguez is our communications expert. O'Connor handles explosives. Wright specializes in reconnaissance. And I coordinate logistics and supply operations. Sarah paused thoughtfully before answering. "I suppose you could say I'm a problem solver. I tend to handle situations that require creative solutions." Her response was truthful, but deliberately nonspecific, a habit developed through years of operating in environments where revealing too much information could compromise ongoing operations or endanger personnel. The phrase creative solutions struck the assembled soldiers as particularly vague and possibly pretentious. In their experience, effective military operations depended on proven tactics, extensive training, and adherence to established procedures rather than creative improvisation. Her answer reinforced their growing conviction that she was probably an analyst or administrator who had somehow been placed in the wrong position. As the afternoon training session began, the unit prepared for a routine combat exercise designed to maintain their tactical readiness and unit cohesion. The scenario involved neutralizing a simulated enemy position while protecting civilian assets and extracting valuable intelligence. It was the type of operation these men had executed countless times in real-world situations, and they approached it with the serious professionalism that had kept them alive through numerous deployments. Major Hayes addressed the assembled team before the exercise began. Today's scenario simulates a hostage rescue operation in an urban environment. We have multiple objectives: neutralize the threat, secure the civilians, and recover critical intelligence without causing collateral damage. Standard operating procedures apply, but remember that adaptability and teamwork are essential for success. The soldiers began checking their equipment with the methodical precision that came from years of experience. Each man knew his role, understood his responsibilities, and trusted his teammates to perform their duties flawlessly. They moved with the efficient coordination of a well-oiled machine, every action purposeful and economical. Sarah observed their preparations with the same quiet attention she had shown throughout the day. When issued standard equipment for the exercise, she accepted it without comment or special requests. Her familiarity with the weapons and gear was evident in her handling, but her teammates attributed this to basic military training rather than specialized experience. "Stick close to the group," Corporal Wright advised her quietly as they moved toward the training area. "These exercises can get pretty chaotic, and it's easy to get disoriented if you're not used to this level of intensity. Don't hesitate to call for backup if you find yourself in over your head." His concern was genuine, reflecting the protective instinct that experienced soldiers often felt toward newcomers who might not yet be prepared for the demands of elite operations. None of them wanted to see someone get hurt or fail simply because they had been thrust into a situation beyond their current capabilities. The training facility had been configured to replicate an urban environment with multiple buildings, narrow alleys, and various obstacles that would challenge the team's ability to navigate while maintaining tactical awareness. Hidden throughout the complex were instructors armed with simulation weapons who would act as enemy combatants, testing the unit's response to unexpected threats and changing conditions. As the exercise commenced, the established team members moved with practiced efficiency, communicating through hand signals and coordinated movements that demonstrated their extensive shared experience. They had developed an almost telepathic understanding of each other's capabilities and tendencies, allowing them to function as a single organism rather than a collection of individuals. Sarah initially positioned herself toward the rear of the formation, a choice that her teammates interpreted as appropriate caution from someone who recognized her limitations. They adjusted their tactics slightly to account for what they perceived as a weak link in their operational capability, creating protective zones and backup plans that would compensate for her presumed inexperience. The first phase of the exercise proceeded smoothly, with the team successfully navigating the initial obstacles and neutralizing several simulated enemies. Their movements were textbook examples of special operations tactics, demonstrating why Delta Force units were considered among the most effective military forces in the world. Each man performed his role with precision, and their coordinated effort appeared to be heading toward another successful training completion. However, military exercises were designed to present unexpected challenges that would test adaptability and problem-solving skills under pressure. As the team approached the building where the hostages were supposedly being held, the scenario suddenly became significantly more complex. Multiple simulation explosions erupted around their position, accompanied by the appearance of additional enemy combatants in positions that had not been previously identified. The situation rapidly evolved from a straightforward tactical operation into a chaotic, multi-front engagement that would challenge even the most experienced special operations personnel. Contact left. Multiple tangos in the building across the street. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the communication system as he spotted muzzle flashes from an unexpected direction. Simultaneously, O'Connor reported movement to their rear. "We've got company behind us. They're trying to cut off our escape route." The team found themselves caught in a crossfire situation that required immediate tactical decisions and flawless execution to avoid being overwhelmed by superior numbers and positioning. It was exactly the type of scenario that separated elite units from regular forces, demanding split-second decision-making and absolute trust in teammates' abilities. Major Hayes, observing from the control center, nodded with satisfaction as he watched his experienced operators begin to adapt their tactics to the changing situation. This was where years of training and combat experience would prove their value, demonstrating why these men had earned their positions through merit rather than assignment. But something unexpected was about to happen that would fundamentally change how everyone viewed the newest member of Delta Force Unit 7. The soldiers who had spent the entire day making assumptions about Captain Sarah Chen's capabilities were about to discover that their judgments had been based on incomplete information. The next 40 seconds would transform skepticism into shock, amusement into amazement, and doubt into profound respect. The woman they had dismissed as an inexperienced rookie was about to demonstrate skills that would leave even the most seasoned special operations veterans questioning everything they thought they knew about their new teammate. The chaos erupted around them like a deadly symphony, with simulation rounds cracking through the air and the sharp reports of enemy weapons echoing off the concrete walls of the training complex. The seasoned members of Delta Force Unit 7 immediately shifted into combat mode, their bodies moving with the fluid precision that came from countless hours of training and real-world experience. Lieutenant Rodriguez dove for cover behind a concrete barrier, his communication equipment already in his hands as he began coordinating defensive positions. Right, take the high ground on the right flank. O'Connor, we need suppressive fire on that building to our left. Sergeant Thompson was simultaneously assessing their ammunition supplies and plotting potential escape routes when something in his peripheral vision made him pause. Captain Sarah Chun was no longer positioned at the rear of the formation where he expected to find her. Instead, she had somehow moved to an advanced position near the front of their defensive line without anyone noticing her movement. "Chun, get back to cover," Thompson shouted, assuming that panic or inexperience had caused her to expose herself to enemy fire. His protective instincts kicked in as he prepared to risk his own safety to pull her back to a more defensible position. But Sarah did not retreat. Instead, she dropped into a crouch that displayed perfect shooting stance, her weapon coming up to her shoulder with a smoothness that spoke of muscle memory developed through thousands of repetitions. Her breathing became controlled and measured, her entire body settling into a stability that seemed almost supernatural given the chaos erupting around them. The first shot from her weapon was not the wild, desperate firing that might be expected from someone overwhelmed by their first intense combat simulation. It was precise, calculated, and devastatingly effective. The simulation round found its target with surgical accuracy, neutralizing an enemy combatant who had been providing covering fire for his teammates from a concealed position that the rest of the unit had not yet located. Before the sound of her first shot had fully faded, Sarah had already acquired her next target. Her weapon tracking was so smooth it appeared effortless, but the speed and precision of her target acquisition revealed training that went far beyond basic military marksmanship. The second shot followed within milliseconds, dropping another simulated enemy who had been moving to flank their position. Major Hayes, watching from the observation post, leaned forward in his chair with growing amazement. Through his binoculars, he could see Sarah's shooting technique displayed textbook examples of advanced marksmanship that he had only witnessed among the most elite snipers in special operations. Her breathing control, stance stability, and trigger discipline were flawless, but it was the speed of her target acquisition that truly set her apart. The third and fourth shots came in such rapid succession that they sounded almost like a single report. 2 more enemy combatants were eliminated before they could bring their own weapons to bear on the Delta Force position. Sarah's movement between targets was so fluid that she appeared to be anticipating enemy positions rather than simply reacting to threats as they became visible. Corporal Wright, who had been climbing to his assigned Overwatch position, stopped mid-movement to stare at the demonstration of shooting skills taking place below him. In his 8 years of special operations experience, he had worked alongside some of the finest marksmen in the military, but he had never witnessed anything quite like what Sarah Chan was displaying. The enemy combatants, played by highly trained instructors who were experts in realistic combat simulation, began to recognize that their carefully planned ambush was being systematically dismantled by a single shooter. They attempted to adjust their tactics, moving to positions that would provide better cover and concealment while allowing them to coordinate their fire more effectively. Sarah seemed to anticipate their movements before they made them. As instructors shifted position, she was already tracking to where they would be rather than where they had been. Her 5th shot eliminated an enemy who was attempting to establish a new firing position, while her 6th neutralized a combatant who had been trying to coordinate the ambush through hand signals. "What the hell?" Lieutenant Rodriguez whispered into his communication device, his voice filled with disbelief. He had temporarily forgotten about his own tactical responsibilities as he watched Sarah systematically destroy the enemy force with a precision that defied explanation. Sergeant First Class Thompson found himself in the unprecedented situation of being a spectator in his own combat exercise. The enemy threat that had moments before seemed overwhelming was being neutralized with surgical efficiency by someone he had dismissed as inexperienced just hours earlier. His tactical mind struggled to process what he was witnessing. The seventh shot from Sarah's weapon eliminated the enemy commander who had been directing the ambush from a concealed position in a second-story window. The eighth shot neutralized the communications specialist who had been calling for reinforcements. Each target was selected not randomly, but with clear tactical intelligence that demonstrated understanding of enemy command structure and operational priorities. Staff Sergeant O'Connor, whose specialty in explosives had made him intimately familiar with the destructive potential of various weapon systems, realized that Sarah was not simply shooting with exceptional accuracy. She was conducting a systematic dismantling of the enemy force, prioritizing targets based on their tactical value and eliminating them in an order that would maximize disruption to enemy operations. The ninth and 10th shots came almost simultaneously, eliminating the last two enemy combatants who had been attempting to establish a crossfire that would have pinned down the Delta Force unit. In less than 40 seconds, Sarah had neutralized an entire enemy force that had been positioned to overwhelm even an experienced special operations team. The sudden silence that followed was deafening. The simulation weapons stopped firing. The enemy instructors began emerging from their positions to signal the end of the exercise, and the members of Delta Force Unit 7 stood in stunned amazement at what they had just witnessed. Major Hayes activated his communication system to address the team. Exercise concluded. All personnel returned to the briefing area for debriefing. His voice remained professionally neutral, but his mind was racing with questions about the new team member who had just demonstrated skills that went far beyond anything suggested by her personnel file. As the team began moving toward the debriefing area, the atmosphere had changed completely. The casual conversation and joking that typically followed training exercises was replaced by thoughtful silence as each man tried to process what had occurred. They moved with the mechanical efficiency of soldiers following orders, but their attention remained focused on Sarah Chun. Lieutenant Rodriguez approached her as they walked, his earlier skepticism replaced by barely concealed amazement. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked, his tone carrying none of the condescending assumption that had marked his earlier interactions. Sarah's response was characteristically measured and noncommittal. "Practice," she said simply, offering no additional details about her background or training. Her reluctance to elaborate was no longer interpreted as evasiveness born of inexperience, but rather as the professional discretion that often marked personnel with classified operational histories. Corporal Wright, who had witnessed the shooting demonstration from his elevated position, shook his head in disbelief. "I've worked with some of the best snipers in the military," he said to Sergeant Thompson as they walked. "What we just saw goes beyond exceptional marksmanship. That was tactical shooting at a level that takes years to develop." Thompson nodded in agreement, his earlier assumptions about Sarah's capabilities completely shattered. She wasn't just shooting accurately, he observed. She was reading the entire tactical situation and prioritizing targets based on strategic value. That kind of battlefield intelligence usually comes from extensive combat experience. Staff Sergeant O'Connor, whose analytical mind was already working to understand what had occurred, voiced what everyone was thinking. Command doesn't assign people with those kinds of skills to regular units. Whatever her real background is, we've been operating on completely wrong assumptions. The debriefing room felt different as the team assembled for their post-exercise analysis. Major Hayes stood at the front of the room with his usual commanding presence, but his expression carried a new thoughtfulness as he looked at his assembled personnel. The routine nature of what should have been a standard training evaluation had been transformed into something unprecedented. The exercise objectives were successfully completed. He began, his voice carrying the measured tone of an experienced commander. However, the manner of completion presents some interesting tactical considerations that warrant discussion. The Major activated the wall-mounted display screen, which showed a computer-generated replay of the exercise from multiple camera angles. The technological system captured every movement, every shot, and every tactical decision made during the simulation, providing objective data about individual and team performance. As the replay began, the room fell into absolute silence. Watching Sarah's performance from multiple angles simultaneously provided an even more dramatic illustration of what had occurred. The computer tracking showed her movement patterns, target acquisition times, and shot placement with scientific precision. Lieutenant Rodriguez found himself leaning forward in his chair as the data displayed on screen confirmed what his eyes had witnessed during the actual exercise. Sarah's target acquisition time averaged less than 0.8 seconds per target, with shot placement accuracy that exceeded 99%. These numbers placed her performance in a category typically reserved for the most elite military snipers after years of specialized training. The replay showed something else that had been less obvious during the actual exercise. Sarah's tactical positioning throughout the engagement had been flawless. She had moved to locations that provided optimal fields of fire while maintaining cover and concealment, positioned herself to minimize exposure to enemy counterfire, and selected shooting positions that allowed for rapid movement if tactical withdrawal became necessary. Sergeant Thompson watched the replay with growing amazement as the computer analysis revealed the strategic sophistication of Sarah's target selection. She had not simply eliminated enemies as they became visible, but had prioritized them based on their tactical value to enemy operations. Command personnel, communication specialists, and heavy weapons operators have been neutralized first, followed by supporting personnel in an order that maximized disruption to enemy capabilities. The exercise parameters were designed to challenge team coordination under unexpected pressure. Major Hayes continued, his eyes moving across the assembled personnel. The scenario presented a significant tactical challenge that would typically require coordinated team response and carefully planned execution. Staff Sergeant O'Connor realized that the Major was choosing his words carefully, acknowledging exceptional performance without directly highlighting the contrast between expectations and reality. Military protocol required maintaining professional dignity for all personnel, regardless of how dramatically circumstances might differ from initial assumptions. The computer analysis continued displaying data that painted an increasingly clear picture of what had occurred. Sarah's performance metrics were not simply exceptional. They were unprecedented in the unit's training records. Her shooting accuracy, tactical decision-making, and situational awareness all scored in ranges that exceeded established benchmarks for special operations personnel. Corporal Wright found himself studying Sarah's expression as the replay continued. She watched the analysis with the same quiet attention she had shown throughout the day, neither displaying pride in her exceptional performance nor showing surprise at the data being presented. Her reaction suggested that what everyone else considered extraordinary was simply normal for her. As the replay concluded, Major Hayes addressed the team with his characteristic directness. Effective immediately, unit training protocols will be adjusted to incorporate lessons learned from today's exercise. We will be implementing more advanced tactical scenarios that will challenge all team members to reach their maximum potential. The implication was clear without being explicitly stated. The presence of someone with Sarah's capabilities meant that the unit's training would need to evolve to match a higher standard of operational excellence. The men who had spent the day questioning her qualifications now found themselves wondering whether they would be able to meet the performance level she had demonstrated. Lieutenant Rodriguez raised his hand to ask a question that was weighing on everyone's mind. "Sir, will Captain Chun be taking on specialized responsibilities within the unit structure?" His question reflected the tactical reality that someone with their demonstrated skills would typically be assigned roles that maximize their unique capabilities. Major Hayes paused thoughtfully before responding. Captain Chen's specific assignments will be determined based on mission requirements and operational priorities. All team members should be prepared to adapt to new tactical configurations as necessary. His answer was diplomatically phrased, but carried a clear message. The unit's operational procedures would be restructured around the reality of having someone with exceptional capabilities as a team member. The men who had expected to mentor an inexperienced newcomer now realized they might be learning from her instead. As the briefing concluded and personnel began departing for evening meal, the atmosphere in Delta Force Unit 7 had been fundamentally transformed. The woman they had dismissed as a misplaced rookie had demonstrated skills that placed her among the most capable operators any of them had ever encountered. The questions that remained were no longer about Sarah's qualifications or experience, but about the true nature of her background and the missions that had developed such extraordinary capabilities. The 40 seconds that had changed their perceptions were just the beginning of revelations that would reshape everything they thought they knew about their newest team member. The mess hall buzzed with subdued conversations as Delta Force Unit 7 gathered for their evening meal. Unlike the usual atmosphere of casual camaraderie and military humor, tonight carried an undercurrent of curiosity and confusion that affected everyone present. The men who had spent the day making assumptions about their newest team member now found themselves grappling with questions they could not answer. Lieutenant Rodriguez sat with his meal barely touched, his mind replaying the afternoon's events in slow motion. As the unit's communications specialist, he was trained to gather and analyze information, but Sarah Chun presented a puzzle that defied his usual methods of assessment. Personnel files contained basic biographical data and assignment history, but they rarely revealed the depth of specialized training that produced the kind of performance he had witnessed. "I've been thinking about the shooting we saw today," he said quietly to Sergeant Thompson, who was seated across from him. "That wasn't just exceptional marksmanship. The target prioritization showed tactical intelligence that comes from real operational experience, not training exercises." Thompson nodded grimly, his own meal forgotten as he considered the implications. 20 years in special operations, and I've only seen shooting like that from a handful of people. Most of them were legends in the sniper community with decades of field experience. She made it look effortless. Staff Sergeant O'Connor joined the conversation, his analytical mind having spent the past few hours dissecting what he had observed. "The weapon handling bothered me the most," he admitted. "She moved between targets with muscle memory that takes years to develop. You don't get that kind of proficiency from qualification courses or even advanced marksmanship training." Corporal Wright, who had maintained his position in the overwatch during the exercise, offered his perspective from above. "From my vantage point, I could see her tactical movement patterns. She was reading the entire battlefield like a chess game, anticipating enemy positions before they became visible. That kind of situational awareness comes from extensive combat experience." The four men represented decades of combined special operations experience, having served in multiple conflict zones and worked alongside some of the most skilled military personnel in the world. Their collective assessment of Sarah's demonstration carried significant weight, and their unanimous conclusion that her abilities exceeded normal parameters raised uncomfortable questions about what they had missed. Major Hayes approached their table with his own meal tray, his presence immediately commanding attention from the assembled personnel. As the unit commander, he was responsible for understanding the capabilities and limitations of every team member, and today's exercise had revealed a significant gap in his knowledge about Captain Chun. "Gentlemen," he said as he took a seat, "I suspect you're discussing the same questions that have been occupying my thoughts since this afternoon's exercise concluded." His direct approach reflected his leadership style, but also acknowledged the unusual nature of the situation they were facing. Lieutenant Rodriguez spoke carefully, aware that questioning personnel assignments could be seen as challenging command decisions. "Sir, we're trying to understand how someone with Captain Chin's demonstrated capabilities ended up assigned to our unit. Those kinds of skills usually come with specific operational backgrounds that would be reflected in briefing materials." The Major's expression remained neutral, but his response carried subtle implications. "Personnel assignments are made based on operational requirements and strategic considerations that may not always be apparent at the unit level. Sometimes the most important qualifications are the ones that cannot be included in standard documentation. His words suggested that Sarah's assignment was not random or mistaken, but rather part of a larger strategic decision that involved classified information. The idea that their unit had been specifically selected to receive someone with exceptional but undisclosed capabilities raised new questions about future mission assignments and operational priorities. Sergeant Thompson, whose directness had served him well throughout his military career, decided to voice the concern that was weighing on everyone's minds. "Sir, if Captain Chun has specialized experience that affects our operational capabilities, shouldn't the team be briefed on how to integrate those skills into our tactical planning?" The question was professionally phrased, but carried an underlying request for information that would help them understand their new teammates' role within the unit structure. Effective special operations required complete trust and understanding between team members, and mysterious backgrounds could undermine the cooperation essential for mission success. Major Hayes considered his response carefully before speaking. "Captain Chen's integration into the unit will evolve naturally as you work together on future operations. I have complete confidence that professional relationships will develop based on demonstrated competence rather than speculation about background assignments." His diplomatic answer provided no specific information, but conveyed clear guidance about how personnel should approach their interactions with Sarah. The emphasis on demonstrated competence rather than background speculation suggested that her past assignments might involve classified operations that could not be discussed openly. As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah approached their table with her own meal tray. The men who had been discussing her capabilities fell silent, suddenly, aware that speculation about a teammate's background in their presence might be considered unprofessional, regardless of their curiosity. "Mind if I join you?" she asked simply, her tone carrying no indication that she was aware of being the subject of their discussion. Her directness was refreshing after the careful, diplomatic language that had marked the previous conversation. "Of course," Major Hayes replied, gesturing to an empty chair. "We were just discussing how the unit will adapt our training protocols based on lessons learned from today's exercise." Sarah settled into her seat with the efficient movements of someone accustomed to eating quickly in various environments. Her meal choices were practical rather than elaborate, reflecting either simple preferences or habits developed in situations where food was fuel rather than entertainment. Lieutenant Rodriguez, whose role as communications specialist made him naturally curious about information networks, decided to approach the subject diplomatically. "Captain, your tactical awareness during the exercise was impressive. It reminded me of techniques I've seen used by personnel with extensive reconnaissance experience." His statement was designed to invite elaboration without directly questioning her background, offering an opportunity for Sarah to share information if she chose to do so. The conversational technique was subtle enough to maintain professional courtesy while gathering intelligence about her experience. Sarah's response was measured and thoughtful. "Situational awareness is essential in any operational environment," she said, neither confirming nor denying the implied question about reconnaissance experience. Understanding the broader tactical picture usually makes individual decisions more effective. Her answer was truthful, but maintained the same professional discretion that had marked all her previous responses. The men at the table were beginning to recognize that Sarah's reluctance to discuss specifics was not evasiveness, but rather the ingrained caution of someone whose operational experience might involve classified activities. Staff Sergeant O'Connor, whose background in explosives had taught him to approach problems systematically, tried a different angle. "The target prioritization you demonstrated showed advanced tactical training. Most marksmen focus on immediate threats, but you seem to be eliminating targets based on strategic value to enemy operations." His observation was accurate and demonstrated his own tactical sophistication, but it also represented an attempt to understand the thinking process behind Sarah's shooting sequence. The ability to rapidly assess and prioritize targets in combat situations was a skill that typically required extensive field experience. Sarah nodded acknowledgement of his analysis. Effective resource allocation is important in any complex situation, she replied. Whether you're dealing with tactical scenarios or logistical challenges, understanding priorities usually leads to better outcomes. Her response again provided validation without specific details, using language that could apply to various types of operational experience. The pattern of her answers suggested someone who was comfortable discussing tactical principles, but avoided revealing information about specific training or assignments. Corporal Wright, whose reconnaissance specialty had developed his observational skills, noticed something that others had missed. Sarah's eating habits reflected techniques used by personnel who had operated in hostile environments where meals might be interrupted by immediate tactical requirements. She ate efficiently, maintained situational awareness of her surroundings, and positioned herself with clear sight lines to all entrances. "Captain," he said carefully, "your operational awareness extends beyond just combat situations. That kind of environmental scanning usually comes from experience in uncertain security environments." His comment was an observation rather than a question, but it represented another piece of evidence suggesting that Sarah's background involved more than standard military assignments. The habits he noticed were subtle, but unmistakable to someone trained in reconnaissance techniques. Sarah paused briefly before responding, seeming to consider how much information would be appropriate to share. Staying alert becomes second nature when you've worked in various challenging situations, she said finally. It's usually better to maintain awareness even when specific threats aren't apparent. Major Hayes, who had been listening to the careful exchange of questions and diplomatically vague answers, decided to provide some guidance for future interactions. "Gentlemen, I suggest we focus on learning about Captain Chen's capabilities through working together rather than attempting to reconstruct her service history through conversation." His intervention was gentle but clear, establishing boundaries around personal questioning while encouraging professional cooperation. The message was that Sarah's background would be revealed through actions rather than interrogation, and that unit effectiveness would depend on accepting her demonstrated competence rather than satisfying curiosity about her past. The remainder of the meal proceeded with more conventional military conversation about equipment, training schedules, and general operational topics. However, the underlying questions about Sarah's background continued to influence the interaction, creating an atmosphere of respectful curiosity rather than the casual familiarity that typically characterized team meals. As dinner concluded and personnel began departing for evening activities, Lieutenant Rodriguez made a decision to approach Sarah privately. His role as communications specialist gave him legitimate reasons to discuss operational procedures with new team members, but his real motivation was to understand how her capabilities would affect unit communications and coordination. "Captain," he said as they walked toward the barracks area, "I'd like to discuss how your tactical preferences might affect our communication protocols during operations. Your decision-making speed during the exercise suggests you might need modified coordination procedures." His approach was professionally appropriate while acknowledging that her exceptional capabilities might require adjustments to standard operating procedures. The recognition that the unit might need to adapt to her abilities rather than the reverse represented a significant shift from morning assumptions about mentoring an inexperienced teammate. Sarah considered his request thoughtfully. "Communication efficiency is always important," she agreed. "I'm comfortable with standard protocols, but I'm also flexible about modifications if they improve operational effectiveness." Her response suggested familiarity with various communication systems and willingness to integrate with existing procedures, but it also implied experience with operations that required customized protocols. The combination of adaptability and specific knowledge indicated exposure to diverse operational environments. As they reached the barracks area, Rodriguez realized that his attempt to gather more information about Sarah's background had instead provided additional evidence of capabilities that extended beyond normal special operations experience. Her familiarity with protocol modifications, her casual reference to operational effectiveness considerations, and her evident comfort with complex tactical decision-making all suggested training and experience that went far beyond standard military assignments. The evening concluded with more questions than answers for the members of Delta Force Unit 7. The woman they had dismissed as inexperienced had demonstrated skills that placed her among the most capable operators they had ever encountered, but her background remained largely mysterious. The 40 seconds that had shattered their initial assumptions were beginning to seem like just the first revelation in what promised to be a series of discoveries about their enigmatic new teammate. The secure communications center of the military compound hummed with electronic activity as Major Hayes sat before his classified terminal, staring at a priority message that had arrived during the night. The communication bore the highest security classifications and carried authorization codes that he recognized as originating from the most senior levels of Special Operations Command. The message was brief, but contained information that fundamentally changed his understanding of Captain Sarachin's assignment to Delta Force Unit 7. As he read through the classified details, Major Hayes felt a mixture of amazement and concern about the implications for his unit's future operations. According to the classified briefing, Captain Chun was not simply a skilled operator being reassigned between units. She was Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chun, one of the most decorated special operations officers in military history, operating under deep cover protocols that had required the temporary reduction of her apparent rank and the concealment of her true service record. The document revealed that over the past 8 years, Sarah had commanded Operation Phantom Strike, a classified program that conducted the most sensitive and dangerous missions in special operations. Her unit had been responsible for operations that could never be officially acknowledged, working in environments where traditional military protocols were insufficient and where success required capabilities that exceeded normal human limitations. The briefing detailed missions that read like fiction, but carried the authentication of verified intelligence reports. Sarah had led rescue operations in hostile territory where entire conventional units had failed, eliminated high-value targets that other agencies deemed impossible to reach, and prevented international incidents through actions that would remain classified for decades. Her marksmanship records, when viewed without classification restrictions, showed performance levels that had earned her recognition as possibly the most skilled precision shooter in military history. During one documented mission, she had eliminated 17 hostile targets from distances exceeding 1,200 meters while protecting civilian evacuees in an urban environment. The statistical analysis of her shooting performance placed her accuracy ratings beyond the measurement capabilities of standard testing protocols. Major Hayes learned that Sarah's tactical decision-making had been studied by military strategists as examples of perfect battlefield intelligence. Her ability to read complex tactical situations and prioritize targets based on strategic value had saved countless lives and prevented mission failures that would have had international consequences. The classified briefing explained that Operation Phantom Strike had been officially disbanded 3 months earlier, following the successful completion of its primary objectives. Sarah's assignment to Delta Force Unit 7 was part of a transition protocol designed to integrate her capabilities into conventional special operations while maintaining operational security about her previous activities. The document included a personal message from the Commanding General of Special Operations, acknowledging that Sarah's true background could not be revealed to unit personnel without compromising ongoing security protocols, but requesting that Major Hayes provide whatever support necessary to ensure her successful integration into regular military operations. As Major Hayes absorbed this information, he realized that his unit had not received an inexperienced newcomer requiring mentoring, but rather one of the most capable special operations officers in military history who was adjusting to working within normal unit structures for the first time in years. The irony of the situation was profound. His men had spent the previous day questioning Sarah's qualifications while she had been evaluating their unit's capabilities and determining how to operate effectively within their established procedures. The exercise demonstration that had amazed them represented a deliberately restrained display of abilities that exceeded what could be safely revealed without raising security concerns. Major Hayes understood that he now faced the challenge of managing a team that included someone whose true capabilities could destabilize unit cohesion if not handled carefully. Sarah's presence would inevitably raise the operational standards expected of all personnel, but revealing her background would create security violations that could compromise ongoing classified operations. He made the decision to request a private meeting with Sarah to discuss how her integration could proceed most effectively. The conversation would need to address the reality of her situation without violating security protocols, while ensuring that unit effectiveness was maximized through appropriate utilization of her exceptional capabilities. Later that morning, Major Hayes found Sarah in the equipment maintenance area, methodically cleaning and inspecting her assigned weapons with a thoroughness that reflected professional habits rather than novice uncertainty. Her attention to detail was meticulous, and her familiarity with various weapon systems was evident in her efficient handling of equipment that some operators took months to master. "Captain Chun," he said formally, "I'd like to discuss your integration progress and any concerns you might have about unit operations." Sarah looked up from her work, immediately recognizing the careful tone that indicated a conversation involving sensitive topics. Her expression remained professionally neutral, but her attention focused completely on the Major's words and body language. "Of course, sir," she replied, setting aside her cleaning equipment and giving him her full attention. "I'm satisfied with the unit's operational standards and appreciate the professional reception I've received from team members." Her response was diplomatic, but carried subtle implications about her assessment of unit capabilities and her recognition that her reception had evolved significantly since her arrival. The acknowledgement of professional treatment suggested awareness that initial assumptions had been corrected through demonstrated performance. Major Hayes gestured toward his office, indicating that their conversation required privacy beyond what the equipment area could provide. "Let's continue this discussion in a more secure environment," he said, leading the way toward the administrative building. As they walked, Sarah maintained the same observational awareness that had characterized her behavior since arrival. But Major Hayes now understood that her environmental scanning represented professional habits developed through years of operating in hostile territory rather than nervous uncertainty about her new assignment. Once settled in his office with the door secured, Major Hayes addressed the situation directly. "Captain, I received some additional information about your background that helps explain the exceptional performance you demonstrated yesterday." Sarah's expression remained carefully neutral, but her posture shifted slightly to indicate complete attention to his words. Her response would need to balance acknowledgement of her true capabilities with maintenance of operational security protocols. "I understand that operational assignments often involve information that affects how personnel interact with new environments," she replied carefully, neither confirming nor denying specific knowledge about classified communications. Major Hayes appreciated her professional discretion while recognizing that they both understood the real nature of their conversation. "The information I received helps me understand how to maximize unit effectiveness while respecting the various considerations that affect personnel assignments." His diplomatic language acknowledged the security restrictions while establishing that he now understood her true qualifications and the sensitive nature of her transition to conventional operations. "Sir," Sarah said thoughtfully, "I want to emphasize that my primary goal is successful integration with this unit's established procedures and personnel. I have no desire to disrupt effective working relationships or create complications that might affect mission readiness." Her statement addressed the central challenge of her situation: how to utilize exceptional capabilities without undermining team cohesion or revealing classified background information. The emphasis on integration rather than leadership reflected her understanding that successful transition required adapting to normal military structures. Major Hayes nodded his understanding. "The unit will benefit significantly from your experience and capabilities, but we need to ensure that integration proceeds at a pace that maintains team effectiveness and respects all operational considerations. His response confirmed that he would support her transition while managing the security and personnel challenges that her presence created. The reference to operational considerations acknowledged the classified restrictions that limited how much information could be shared with other team members. "I appreciate your understanding," Sarah replied. "I'm confident that professional relationships will develop naturally as we work together on various operations. My experience has taught me that demonstrated competence is usually more valuable than detailed explanations of background qualifications." Her words reflected the same philosophy that had guided her interactions with the team, emphasizing performance over credentials while maintaining the professional discretion necessary to protect classified information. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, establishing protocols for how Sarah's capabilities would be integrated into unit operations without compromising security or creating personnel management challenges. They discussed tactical modifications that could accommodate her exceptional abilities while maintaining the appearance of normal special operations procedures. As their meeting concluded, Major Hayes felt confident that Sarah's transition to Delta Force Unit 7 would proceed successfully, but he also recognized that managing a team with such diverse capability levels would present ongoing leadership challenges that required careful attention to maintain unit effectiveness. Meanwhile, the other members of Delta Force Unit 7 were conducting their own informal investigation into their enigmatic teammate. Lieutenant Rodriguez had spent the morning reviewing publicly available military databases, searching for any information about Captain Sarah Chun that might explain her exceptional capabilities. His research had yielded minimal results, finding only basic service records that provided no indication of specialized training or unusual assignments. The absence of detailed information was itself significant, suggesting that Sarah's true background involved classified operations that would not appear in standard military databases. Sergeant Thompson approached Rodriguez with his own findings from conversations with contacts in other special operations units. "I made some calls to friends in various units," he reported quietly. "Several people recognized the name Sarah Chun, but they all became very vague when I asked for details about her service history. The pattern of recognition followed by evasive responses suggested that Sarah's reputation was known within special operations communities, but that discussing her background was either prohibited or discouraged by security protocols." Staff Sergeant O'Connor had been analyzing the technical aspects of Sarah's shooting performance, using his knowledge of ballistics and weapons systems to understand the skill level required for her demonstration. "I ran calculations on her target acquisition times and accuracy percentages," he informed the group. "The numbers indicate training and experience that goes far beyond normal special operations standards." Corporal Wright added his own observation from studying unit assignment patterns. "Personnel with her apparent skill levels are usually assigned to highly specialized units with specific mission profiles. Assignment to a general special operations unit like ours would be unusual unless there were specific strategic reasons." The collective investigation by unit members had produced circumstantial evidence that Sarah's background involved classified operations and exceptional capabilities, but no concrete information that would satisfy their curiosity about her true service history. As the day progressed, it became clear that Sarah Chun remained an enigma whose true background would likely never be fully revealed to her teammates. The 40 seconds that had shattered their initial assumptions were beginning to seem like a small glimpse of capabilities that extended far beyond what they had witnessed. The question facing Delta Force Unit 7 was no longer about Sarah's qualifications, but about how they would adapt to working alongside someone whose true abilities exceeded anything they had previously encountered. The rookie they had dismissed had proven to be a legend operating in disguise, and their unit would never be quite the same. 6 weeks had passed since Captain Sarah Chin's arrival at Delta Force Unit 7, and the transformation within the unit was evident in every aspect of their operations. The men who had initially dismissed her as an inexperienced rookie now found themselves part of a team that operated at performance levels they had never previously imagined possible. The change had been gradual, but unmistakable. Training exercises that had once been considered challenging now seemed routine as unit members pushed themselves to match the standards that Sarah's presence had established. Her quiet competence and professional demeanor had inspired rather than intimidated, creating an atmosphere where excellence became the natural expectation rather than an exceptional achievement. Lieutenant Rodriguez discovered that working alongside someone with Sarah's tactical intelligence had elevated his own performance as communications coordinator. Her ability to anticipate information needs and provide precise situation reports had streamlined their operational efficiency in ways that benefited every team member. The sophisticated coordination techniques she employed had taught him new approaches to battlefield communication that made their entire unit more effective. "The difference in our response times is incredible," Rodriguez explained to Sergeant Thompson during their morning equipment check. "Having someone who can read tactical situations that accurately means we're always ahead of developing problems instead of reacting to them after they become critical." Thompson nodded in agreement, his own logistics and supply coordination responsibilities having been enhanced by Sarah's strategic thinking. "She sees the big picture in ways that help everyone do their jobs better," he observed. "It's not just about her individual capabilities, but how she helps the whole team function more effectively." The sergeant's assessment reflected the broader impact that Sarah's integration had created. Rather than simply adding another skilled operator to their roster, her presence had catalyzed improvements in everyone's performance levels and tactical sophistication. Staff Sergeant O'Connor had experienced perhaps the most dramatic professional growth during the 6 weeks. Working with someone who understood explosive systems at Sarah's level had pushed him to develop techniques and approaches that exceeded his previous expertise. Their collaborative work on tactical demolitions had produced innovations that were already being studied for implementation across other special operations units. "I thought I knew everything about tactical explosives," O'Connor admitted to the group during their weekly team meeting. "Working with Sarah has shown me possibilities I never considered. Her understanding of how different systems interact has opened up entirely new approaches to mission planning." Corporal Wright's reconnaissance capabilities had similarly evolved through exposure to Sarah's observational techniques and intelligence analysis methods. Her subtle guidance had taught him to see patterns and connections that had previously escaped his notice, making him far more effective at gathering and interpreting tactical intelligence. "The reconnaissance training I received was excellent," Wright acknowledged, "but Sarah has shown me how to integrate different types of information in ways that provide much clearer tactical pictures. My reports are more accurate and useful because I've learned to see situations the way she does." Major Hayes observed these developments with satisfaction, recognizing that Sarah's integration had achieved the optimal outcome: enhanced unit capability without disrupting team cohesion. The mysterious woman who had arrived with minimal background information had proven to be exactly what his unit needed to reach their maximum potential. The first major test of their enhanced capabilities came during a classified mission assignment that would have been considered at the upper limit of their previous operational scope. The target was a high-value prisoner extraction from a hostile facility in a politically sensitive region where failure would create international complications. As the team prepared for their mission briefing, the atmosphere reflected confidence rather than the tension that had marked similar operations in the past. 6 weeks of training alongside Sarah had given them faith in their collective abilities and trust in tactics that had been proven through her demonstrated expertise. Major Hayes addressed the assembled team in the secure briefing room. "This mission represents a significant operational challenge that will test every aspect of our training and teamwork," he began. "The target facility is heavily defended, located in hostile territory, and requires precision execution to avoid political complications." He activated the mission display system, revealing detailed intelligence about their objective. The facility was a converted industrial complex surrounded by multiple security perimeters, electronic surveillance systems, and rapid response forces that could overwhelm conventional assault teams. "The prisoner is a captured intelligence operative whose information is critical to ongoing operations," Major Hayes continued. Standard extraction protocols are insufficient due to the facility's security measures and the hostile environment surrounding the target location. Lieutenant Rodriguez studied the communication intercepts and electronic intelligence, immediately recognizing that conventional coordination would be inadequate for the mission's complexity. However, 6 weeks of working with Sarah had taught him to think beyond standard procedures and consider innovative approaches to tactical challenges. "Sir," he said, "the communication patterns suggest enemy coordination vulnerabilities that could be exploited if we approach this differently than normal extraction protocols would indicate." His observation reflected the enhanced analytical capabilities that had developed through exposure to Sarah's strategic thinking. Instead of accepting mission limitations at face value, he was now identifying opportunities that conventional planning might have missed. Sergeant Thompson examined the logistics requirements and supply considerations, applying lessons learned from weeks of working with someone who understood resource allocation at a strategic level. "The timeline and equipment requirements are challenging," he acknowledged, "but manageable if we optimize our approach based on tactical priorities rather than standard operational procedures." His assessment demonstrated the same evolution in thinking that had affected all team members. Rather than viewing difficult requirements as obstacles, they had learned to see them as problems that could be solved through creative planning and exceptional execution. Staff Sergeant O'Connor analyzed the facility's defensive structures with new understanding of how different systems could be defeated through coordinated rather than sequential attacks. "The security measures are formidable individually," he observed, "but they have interdependencies that create vulnerabilities if we target them systematically rather than directly." Corporal Wright's reconnaissance analysis revealed intelligence opportunities that standard assessment procedures might have overlooked. The facility's location provides multiple approach routes that enemy planning probably hasn't anticipated, he reported. Their defensive posture is designed to counter conventional assault techniques rather than adaptive infiltration methods. As the briefing continued, Major Hayes recognized that his team was approaching the mission with sophistication that exceeded their previous capabilities. 6 weeks of learning from Sarah had elevated their tactical thinking to levels that made formerly impossible missions seem achievable. Sarah herself contributed to the mission planning with characteristic precision and insight, offering suggestions that integrated seamlessly with her teammates' ideas while providing strategic guidance that transformed their good plans into exceptional ones. Her input was provided as collaborative enhancement rather than authoritative direction, maintaining the team dynamic while ensuring optimal tactical decisions. The mission execution 3 days later demonstrated the full extent of Delta Force Unit 7's evolution. Their approach to the target combined innovative tactics with flawless coordination, achieving objectives that would have been beyond their reach just 2 months earlier. Every team member performed at levels that exceeded their previous capabilities, working together with precision that reflected months rather than weeks of integration. The prisoner extraction was completed without casualties, without political complications, and without revealing their presence to hostile forces. The operation became a model for similar missions and earned recognition at the highest levels of Special Operations Command. As the team returned from their successful mission, the transformation that had begun with Sarah's arrival reached its completion. The men who had initially questioned her qualifications now understood that they had been privileged to work alongside one of the most capable operators in military history. Lieutenant Rodriguez spoke for the entire team during their post-mission debrief. 6 weeks ago, we thought we were getting a rookie who needed our guidance, he said with a mixture of amazement and respect. Instead, we discovered that we were the ones who had things to learn. Sergeant Thompson added his own perspective on their evolution. Working with Sarah hasn't just made us better individually, he observed. She's taught us how to be better as a team, how to think differently about problems, and how to achieve things we never thought were possible. Staff Sergeant O'Connor nodded in agreement. The 40 seconds that changed our first impressions turned out to be just the beginning, he reflected. Every day since then has been an education in what special operations can accomplish when you have the right person showing you possibilities you never considered. Corporal Wright summed up the impact that Sarah's presence had created. "She never told us we were doing anything wrong," he said thoughtfully. "Instead, she showed us how to do everything better." That's the mark of someone who doesn't just have exceptional skills, but understands how to share those skills in ways that help everyone improve. Major Hayes listened to his team's assessments with deep satisfaction, recognizing that Sarah Chin's integration into Delta Force Unit 7 had achieved everything he could have hoped for and more. The mysterious woman who had arrived with minimal background information had transformed his unit into one of the most capable special operations teams he had ever commanded. As evening approached and the team settled into their post-mission routine, Sarah remained the quietly professional presence she had been from her first day. The legends and speculation about her background continued to circulate, but they had become less important than the reality of working alongside someone whose competence spoke louder than any credentials or service records. The rookie who had been laughed at for 40 seconds had become the foundation upon which Delta Force Unit 7 built their reputation for excellence. Her arrival had marked the beginning of their evolution from a good special operations unit into an exceptional one, proving that sometimes the most important qualifications are the ones that cannot be measured until they are demonstrated in action. The men who had initially doubted her presence now could not imagine their unit without her. Sarah Chun had not just joined Delta Force Unit 7. She had helped them discover what they were truly capable of achieving when they stopped limiting themselves to what they thought was possible and started reaching for what exceptional teamwork could accomplish. The 40 seconds that had shattered their assumptions had become the catalyst for transformation that none of them would ever forget, and the beginning of a partnership that would redefine what elite special operations could achieve when built on mutual respect, shared excellence, and the understanding that true capability often comes in unexpected forms.